welcome back to another edition, podcast ep of Black Guys on White Movies. I'm your host, Aaron Covington, along with,
Bernard Harris.
and today we're in our rom-com bag, or at least our romance bag a little bit.
Yeah, definitely in our romance era for sure, a little bit for sure.
Coming off a Pretty Woman this week, we're doing Before Sunrise,
Mm-hmm.
1995 romantic drama film directed by Richard Linklater, starring and really featuring only Ethan Hawke and Julie Delphi.
Yeah, for sure. It's we talked about last time, I think, the classic two-hander, and this is a trilogy of films, really. I mean, there are two more after the one that we're talking about today. And is it the only like two-hander trilogy that exists? Probably.
Man, yeah. I mean, definitely, we'll get into Richard Linklater, but a type of filmmaking that is unique, really unique to him. Not that other
Absolutely.
people haven't done two-handers and there's like Dinner with Andre and a bunch of other stuff, but over his career, you see a focus on like indie filmmaking and on experimenting with filmmaking and on long, uh, like coming back to things. Like in this
Yeah.
trilogy, it's the same characters over like an 18-year span. And I wouldn't be surprised if they wanted to do a fourth one, but got maybe held up with, because it would have been like last year in
Yeah,
terms
it
of
would have
just
been
trying to
last year if
release
that.
some films. Yeah. If like COVID and other complications of the world today held them up. Let me
Yeah,
get,
I wonder about that, definitely as someone who's a fan of this trilogy. I have been in the camp of fans who wanted it to become like a lifelong project, right? That
right.
basically we check in with this couple once a decade over the course of their romantic relationship, right? But obviously, like you said, that didn't happen. And I read a little bit up on it. It sounds like maybe some COVID things, maybe just the actors and the director not really figuring out what's the thing that where the movie is.
Oh, so there was some
I
talk
think
about
that they talked about it, and the director has like kind of addressed it slightly. To say that they talked about it, really couldn't come up with anything like satisfying, and then everything happened, right?
it. Yeah. Well, if there's like an article about them having talked about it, then it was probably even more serious than, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Because they could have talked about
that's
it and
fair.
there'd been no press. So
That's
definitely
true.
something
Yeah,
they wanted to do, and maybe they'll find a way back to it.
I hope so.
Let me read the IMDb log line. A young man and woman meet on a train in Europe and wind up spending one evening together in Vienna. Unfortunately, both know that this will probably be their only night together.
Well, we already spoiled that.
What's funny is like that, it's just, yeah, log lines are funny because that doesn't make me think of this movie. When you do this,
Mm.
unfortunately, both know that this will probably be their only night together. It's like, is this a horror movie or is this like
Mm.
an adventure movie? All of a sudden, this like it doesn't really make sense.
Unfortunately. Like,
Fortunately, because of what happens, or does somebody die at the end? Yeah.
right. It does sound a lot more, now that you've said that, I didn't think about it before, but it does sound a lot more ominous.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this may be their final night
Never know what's gonna happen to these two.
together.
Black movie of the week is top
Yeah,
five.
top five for sure. I can talk about it real quick. Yeah, top five. I think this was a movie that you and I saw together, if I remember correctly,
Yeah, we
at
saw it
TIFF, right?
when it opened, or not the opening screening, but it must have screened like 4 or 5 times at the Toronto Film Festival
Yeah,
in
that had to be
2014.
14. I
14,
think that
yeah,
was,
you're right.
yeah, 2014. I think it was. Uh,
And we
so
saw one
yeah,
of the last screenings, uh, sitting way in the back,
for sure. Way in the back.
but
Chris
with a
Rock talked
captive audience.
afterwards.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, top five. I think upon seeing it, uh, it struck me immediately as like definitely having had some sort of inspiration or taking something away from this film and the films that this movie has spawned. It's just Chris Rock and Rosario Dawson is the female lead, and they're walking around uh, New York City, getting to know one another. Right? She's a journalist doing an interview, which is not the same conceit as the before movies, but you know, ultimately the same thing. Two people walking around a place, ruminating on life and getting to know one another.
Totally. And definitely Chris Rock's kind of take on Before Sunrise.
Yeah, definitely,
Um,
obviously, a lot more comedy.
yeah, a lot more comedy. He definitely, you know, adds his flair to it, and he has a lot of his comedy friends in it, doing bits and just being funny. And it's a little more plot driven because he is a version of himself in Top Five.
Yeah,
He's a
that's a good point. I
comedian.
forgot
He's
about
kind
that.
of hit the skids. He's like just nervous about a big comeback, and he's doing this interview with this reporter, and it kind of gets him at the end of the movie back in his bag, basically. So he, you know, he's questioning himself, or she's questioning him, and he's responding like, "Am I a sellout? Am I? Do I still have it?" There's like a drug thing. He's like, "Do I need alcohol to do it?" But he's trying to be
Right.
clean. Um, but then some big comedic moments, some flashbacks, like some fake funny sex scenes, some arguments about who's your top five like rappers and things, which is ongoing.
Forever.
You know,
I mean, as long as the rap goes on.
yeah, he really brought in like really the culture into the movie.
Yeah, definitely.
It's it's one of my more it's one of the Chris Rock movies I like a little more. You know,
I would definitely agree with that for sure. I recently saw it a couple years ago. Um, and obviously, you know, when you're watching one of the first showings and Chris Rock is in the place and you're in this little theater at the Toronto Film Festival, that definitely had a feeling that was a little bit more than when I rewatched it, but I still found myself enjoying it quite a bit.
what's also interesting is Julie Delpy loves this kind of movie.
Yeah, she's like in one with Chris Rock, I think.
She is in one with Chris Rock, which is a sequel to another one she made. So in 2007, so Before Sunrise was 95,
95. Before Sunset, the sequel's 94. Or
and
I'm sorry, 2004.
2004. So in 2007 she made 2 Days in Paris. It's her and Adam Goldberg. Uh, she's a photographer in New York City. Um, he's a interior designer. After a bad trip to Venice, they take a train back to Paris to pick up her cat. They just have these conversations, and it kind of blows up their relationship and talks about relationship insecurities and stuff. So a similar type of movie that she wrote and directed.
Mm,
Then 2 years later, in 2009, she made 2 days in New York. So that was 2 days in Paris. I got even confused in my head. And then she made 2 days in New York. It's her, the same character, um, divorced from the interior designer. Now she's dating Mingus, played by Chris Rock.
right.
And they have a vacation in Paris, and they have these conversations, experience some racist interactions, and just go through their relationship in 2 days.
I have not, I've always meant to see those two films. I have not, I've seen bits of 2 Days in New York. Definitely some of the scenes of them arguing and things like that, but never really seen the whole movie.
Yeah, I don't recall seeing the whole movie either. But Chris Rock also made I Think I Love My Wife,
Mm.
which definitely has shades of just like this romance. It's not quite the same, but it's a married man who's tempted by a girl he went to high school with, who's I think an escort in the movie. and it makes him question like his marriage and his place in life and his purpose, and he kind of comes out of his shell, and him and his wife get back together.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, and that's based on a book actually. I didn't realize it was based on a book called Love in the Afternoon. But definitely, shout out to Chris Rock and his indie filmmaking sensibilities, which
For sure. And it feels like it's organic. Like he's actually connected to the, I mean, with Julie Delpy and that connection, he's like connected to the connection of this film and everything, like that whole style of filmmaking, you know?
yeah, I mean, there's something very, Chris Rock's New York, something very New York about it, even
Definitely.
though it's in these things are set in other cities, but there are other, big metropolitan cities and cities where you can walk and talk and see a lot of things, and it's right up that alley.
For sure. For sure.
So top five, definitely recommend.
Yeah, a strong recommend. I mean, especially Rosario Dawson's got the Star Wars show that just dropped. Like, you want to maybe see something else that she's in that's a little bit more down to earth. Top five is still funny. But yeah, interesting film.
Yeah, I haven't seen the Star Wars yet, but I heard people have been raving about it.
It's solid.
Um, yeah. So first thoughts about this movie. Oh, by the way, we're 10 minutes in, but I forgot to mention Amon is out sick.
Yeah, yeah. He's a
Yeah,
man of
he's
the
out.
people. You can't stop him.
He's a man of the people. He's out here shaking hands.
Kissing babies,
All doing the whole
sneezing on
thing.
old folks, the whole thing.
A man of the town, future mayor Amon Doomer. Not feeling well. So we're
Yeah,
moving on, and he'll be back. Obviously,
for sure, for sure.
be back ASAP. We'll have to ask him next time, just like quick thoughts of this movie, just to get caught up.
Yeah, 100%. I because I feel like I don't remember if he said he had seen it, but I feel like
Oh, he definitely hadn't seen
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. So I was like, oh, he was the one I was interested to hear what his thoughts were. So we definitely got to ask that.
Yeah, yeah,
What is it
definitely.
like on 1.5 times speed?
Right. Just keeping up. It was like a rap movie at that speed because they're just talking the whole time.
I will never let that go. I love it.
My early thoughts of this movie, or just from watching it, broad thoughts is, I mean, I enjoy it, and I really didn't take a lot of notes this time. The one thing I did ask was, is he charming or annoying? I think that's a fair question, and really just thinking about the conversations they have and how they would play today. I think they would play well in terms of an audience receiving them, but even the messages that he was sending in the conversation back then, it's like, man, guys have a really singular view of things sometimes, and
Mm-hmm.
we fail to kind of really meld or collaborate with women at times. And you see that a little bit in this movie, even though things pretty much go well from them. But at the same time, they're pretty much head over heels as soon as they meet. They
Right.
play it kind of cool and play it straight. But especially if you're older watching this and you can think back on moments that you had when you were trying to flirt or whatever, you're like, oh, as soon as they saw each other, they were like in the bag and just hoping they could extend this, and they did. So
True. That's a really interesting point, right? Like literally the whole movie is pretty much them trying to extend the moment. And I had some thoughts on that maybe we can get into beyond broad impressions. But broad impressions is, I saw this movie many years ago originally, and I really enjoyed it. It's been a favorite. Going back, it's been a couple years. I try to watch it every few years or so, but it's been a few years. And getting back to it, really remember all the exact ins and outs of it. Famous for my memory for sure. But I enjoyed it. I thought definitely there were some of the thoughts, some of the like things that he voices. I wondered, like, kind of like like for 1995, that really fits. But where is that conversation advanced to in 2023? It's interesting. And there's definitely a lot of like, kind of I think it's even maybe more over dramatic to call it battle of the sexes, but whatever that sort of thing is, like, there's a lot of like kind of back and forth, like, no, what if as a guy, or what if as a woman, you know what I mean? And
yeah,
it does kind of show you maybe where some of those conversations were in 95. The thing that struck me the most, and I'll probably finish it out on this because I think it encompasses everything, was this time I really recognized how much this movie is of an era in every way, shape, or form. It's like really a snapshot of an era. Like, I've never been to Vienna, but I'm sure that Vienna that we walk around in the movie doesn't look like that anymore, right? These two actors don't look like that. The cultural conversation they're involved in doesn't look the same. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, but yet and still, there's something about the performances between the two actors. And, I kept coming back to this. There's a commitment of both the actors, the film, and the two characters to each other to like always come back to the moment. And so like every time they start getting into like maybe one of these more political esoteric maybe like conversations, they do eventually always just like pull it back to like we're walking together and enjoying each other's company right now. And
Interesting.
that felt still kind of feels refreshing, even though I've seen this movie a couple times.
Yeah, I think that's definitely what keeps you in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it was like, if in craftiness, he was like, "This is a battle of the sexes,"
Mm-hmm.
it would get really dull really quick, and he'd have to introduce a lot of plot things. They'd have to go to that play at some point. The cow, the German cow play,
Oh
and
my god.
whatever. But without that, it really brings that introspective point to it, and almost an Eastern philosophical thing of like, you know, back to the moment. Here we
Mm,
are. I'm here with this beautiful woman. I'm here with this, attractive man, and having an experience that just didn't anticipate, couldn't have anticipated.
yeah, that's a good point. Like neither one of them woke up that morning knowing that that's how they were going to spend that day.
And when they unpack their stories, neither one was necessarily looking for this.
Mm-hmm.
They're both in positions where they needed a break from this kind of thing. Really, he just got out of a relationship, as he says. He came to Europe. He came to Europe to visit a girl that he was in a relationship with. And he was like, "Oh, she didn't even want me around anymore."
Right. Yeah, she's moved on,
That
which I
distance.
thought was interesting. If I can comment on that really quickly, I thought even that was interesting in the sense of like, there's I think things about the character Jesse played by Ethan Hawke that could be considered immature. Like they're both 23 in the movie and the characters are 23 as well, right? They're young. So I think, are they charming or annoying? I think the answer is probably both, but there's a lot of annoying to both of them, but especially that character. Um,
Yeah,
but you know, I just felt like even his awareness to like realize that the girl that he was with that he came to Europe for was just like not wanting him around without actually having to say him. Even that was like belies the maturity that both those characters have. They're both very young and they have some immature thoughts about things, but they're both also pretty introspective and pretty mature.
yeah, I agree. I think this is like they have an elevated conversation
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, and some of it is, with him. He is American and an American privileged white kid. I mean, he was
Mm-hmm.
able to travel to Europe and stay there an extra 2 weeks and get a train pass and travel around. And it's not only the money to be able to do that, it's being able to do that unencumbered.
Yeah, safely,
Um,
right?
in her movie with Chris Rock, I haven't seen the whole thing, but just reading about it, it's like they do experience racist situations in that movie, and that's
Mm-hmm.
things that they end up talking about. And obviously, in this one, they don't experience any of that. Nobody. There's a few mentions of like, oh, the vulgar American. Why don't you speak our language? But it's all
Mm-hmm.
pretty light in this movie, and really, it's him that mentions it a couple times,
Yeah,
kind
I
of making
mean,
fun of himself. And
yeah, no, I think there's a great point there. Like when they show the scenes where they're like in bars or clubs or whatever, right? Like without them speaking, they fit right in, right? There's
Yeah,
no thing, and I don't think that maybe a black man in, I don't know, 1995 or even today could just kind of bum around Europe. Like, you're gonna be in that cafe for 5 hours straight, and they're gonna want you to get out of that seat. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? They're
Something's
gonna
gonna
wonder
happen.
what you're doing.
Somebody's gonna say something, or
Yeah,
you have
you don't get that
looks,
anonymity to just black play the background and not have to spend money. You know what I mean?
which actually just reminds me, Atlanta season 3, I think. They're in Europe the whole season. That's a
Mm-hmm.
really, it's not quite before sunrise. Atlanta, I mean, Atlanta's its own thing, 100%.
Right.
But worth checking out to see like an interpretation of a black experience in Europe. The Donald Glover show, Atlanta.
For sure.
But this movie, like I said, super interesting, super enjoyable, and so talk about Richard Linklater just for a minute. Everybody is actually really fascinating. Linklater is a director who really cares about realism.
Mm-hmm.
Just when you look at these actors being 23, playing 23-year-olds, a lot of times something as simple as that does
Mm-hmm.
not happen in movies.
For sure.
And I'm not saying that it's better or worse, but I'm glad that it exists with somebody who cares about that. His big hit, his first big hit, um, Dazed and Confused. His first cult hit is this movie Slacker, which he did before that even for like $23,000. And he had some actors in that movie, but nobody's like famous from that movie, the movie
Mm-hmm.
Slacker. You know, and even that one is super realistic. It follows a single day in the life of these 30 under 30 kids in Austin, Texas. And it's not it's again, he kind of has its minimalist filmmaking, or maybe pre-mumblecore. He's like the original mumblecore.
Yeah, I definitely would say he's part of that original first wave, probably. Yeah.
And it's just people talking about what's going on in their lives and conspiracy theories, and it's a fun movie. And then Days and Confused is a classic. And it's really just, last day of school, also in Austin. I think Linklater must be from Austin. Like,
Yeah, he's
yeah,
from
he's from
Austin.
Austin.
He's from Austin for sure.
And these kids are just experiencing the last day of school. Like, does anything happen? I mean, things happen. People make up and break up, but nothing really happens in that movie at the same time. I've never
Yeah.
seen all of Days and Confused front to end, nonstop.
Yeah, I've only seen pieces of it, clips of it. I know it's an early McConaughey movie.
Great
Uh,
cast.
yeah,
Um,
amazing cast. Anthony Rapp, like, again, we kind of talked about. I kind of mentioned his co-star from Star Trek Discovery before, but again, another person who was like in that original cast of Rent. Like, so great
uh,
cast.
yeah, Mila Jovovich.
Oh wow.
She's been in a bunch of stuff. What was it? Oh yeah, Fifth Element. That was what I was thinking
Yeah,
of.
Fifth Element.
The Fifth Element, Resident Evil game. Ben Affleck has a part in there. He's
Really, I didn't know that.
Parker Posey. Jason London, who been in a bunch of movies, and Paul Hauser.
Definitely know that name.
Yeah, who's a guy that's just been in a bunch of stuff. Too Fast, Too Furious, Pitch Black,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Good Will Hunting, School Ties, just
For
a bunch
sure.
of stuff. Like, so a lot of and Renee Zellweger had a small part in that movie also.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So
Like
yeah, like
that like launched the era of young actors.
totally, totally. And it's on a bunch of like lists, top 100 lists or important movie lists. So, and then he also did, skipping ahead quite a bit to a movie that's like this one. He also did The Newton Boys, which is a Western crime film, a little kind of like he's done movies that are also not just 1 or 2 days in a person's life.
Yeah, I
He
feel like that's
he
definitely like
directed
a
School of Rock also with Jack Black.
yeah, he's done a couple like studio movies here and there.
School of Rock is crazy because it was written by Mike White, who did White Lotus. and directed by Richard Linklater. But it's
That's
like a pop, poppy, like fun Disney as it's not Disney, but it's like a Disney movie about teaching kids how to play instruments.
it's definitely like kind of a all ages joint. You know what I mean?
Definitely, definitely. It's a lot of fun. But then the movie I'm gonna go ahead to Boyhood,
Yeah, boy, for sure.
which is a movie filmed over 11 years from 2002 to 2013. So literally he would get the actors together when they could. I don't know exactly when, but every couple years or whatever to so he could show the passage of time in real time
Hmm.
of this family. Also starring Ethan Hawke as a dad, Patricia Arquette as a mom, and then the kids. And it's really, I mean, visually, it's about the kids aging from like 6 to 18,
Hmm.
and you see them as a family come together. It's almost like vignettes of like this is them at 6 years old, and then 2 years later at 8, and then a year later, and we just kind of go through their lives over this like 10, 11 year period. It's good. It was a good movie when it came
It's a
out.
good movie. Also, another one where it's like it's not really about anything other than the thing that it's about, right? Like it's about the family navigating like the relationships and divorce and all the things that come over 11 10, 12 years worth of time, and like
Right.
that's what it's about. You know what I mean?
100%. So that's just really interesting, like to be a filmmaker that thinks like that and puts projects together like that.
Yeah, I think he's got like a one thing that I guess I've thought about it in a sense, like he's got a real commitment to like investigating time, right? Like time and human life. You know what I mean? A lot of it's about, like you said, following somebody kind of real time throughout their day, even though it's not real time, right? It'll be a 2 hour movie, but it feels like real time because like he will just leave the camera going in a scene when like nothing big is happening except maybe two people are talking or bullshitting around or whatever. And so he's got like a real, there's that always that kind of indie movie slice of life. I think even like, you know, there's that same version of in literature and photography. All of these have that kind of like very realist sort of um sides to the art or the craft or whatever.
100%.
But yeah, he's definitely like interested in like playing with time, if I could put it in a broad way, because even he's got a couple of movies like Waking Life, which has some animation in it. It's kind of about dreams. He did In a Scanner Darkly, which is like with Keanu Reeves, uh, and it's like computer animated, and that one deals with like time and time loss. You know what I mean? So there's definitely something about his whole way of viewing the world that wants to deal with time somehow.
Totally. And I think that well, okay, let's pause for a second. Let's
Mhm.
let me close this and let's relog back in. I guess like it's not that other people don't do these kind of movies. Women and black people, black men. I've definitely seen movies from other countries that are similar to this. But I do think, I mean, it's hard to get a movie like this made. You know, his budgets are really low, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very independent filmmaking. He's definitely an independent filmmaker, even though he's made a couple studio films. But he always comes back to making these low budget movies, and that's there's a privilege in that.
Sure.
You know, as we're talking black eyes on white movies and like what are the cultural messages? It's like, well, you get to make this kind of movie. I'm not saying that it's easy for him in any way, but it's definitely harder for somebody else in America. Like I've definitely seen like Japanese movies that are similar in this kind of pace and tone, right? But they're not um they're made in, they're
Mm-hmm.
subtitled, you know what I mean? Or I've definitely seen movies from other cultures be like this. but I don't know that there's like a black movie that's really like this. I mean, like if you watch Top Five, you see the influence of this, but then it's like, very American in other ways, very like accepted American black film
For sure.
when it gets into like the high comedy moments.
Yeah, and I do wonder like how much of that is like the Chris Rock of it all, or how much of it is like does that kind of what it needs to be in order to
But
be
then
a
that's
black
the question: could there be some young, filmmaker who starts and like just makes films like this? I mean, Barry Jenkins is actually maybe the closest to making like small, soft movies about a thing. Not that his movie, when I say soft, I just mean like there's not gunshots and like action
man?
scenes or
Yeah, I would.
backflips and stuff.
Yeah, there's something about Moonlight, for example, that's much more epic in scale because it like is like
Yeah,
set over the course of this person's life. But there are a lot of small moments in Moonlight that have like kind of like that kind of quiet two people just being together or just talking to one another.
yeah.
That's a good call out.
And the other movie that I actually meant to mention earlier is Medicine for Melancholy,
Mm,
which stars Wyatt Cenac. That was Barry Jenkins' first kind of his that was his directorial debut, and that is very
yeah.
much just like two people hanging out. I think they're in the Bay Area, had a night together and trying to figure things out. So I guess in that
And I,
sense, it is possible. It has happened,
for
but it
sure.
definitely stands alone. Like there's not another medicine for melancholy.
It's interesting just even hearing you talk about the Bay Area piece of it. Like, you know, I think in a completely, utterly different way. But there is a lot of kind of just this quietness, even in something like Fruitvale Station that Ryan did,
Sure, yeah,
like just kind of following that character throughout the day in vignettes that aren't necessarily dramatic. And obviously it ends in much more tragedy.
definitely a very Bay Area thing in terms of American and like American black filmmaking to do something that's like this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, that's very interesting.
That is.
Actually, comes from the Bay. So that's what I think about Richard Linklater. I like his films. Also like Last Flag Flying, which is I think a good take on like
is it
veterans and
is that the one with Steve Carell and
Steve Carell,
that is a
Fishburne.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's a great movie. I forgot that's Linklater. That's a great one.
yeah.
There's a Cicely Tyson scene in that movie that I think is like,
Oh yeah,
if you don't know Cicely Tyson, watch that movie and see what she does with one scene.
yeah. She brings the pain.
For sure.
Yeah. In this movie, so it's really uh right at the beginning. They're on a train, just kind of going through it. We can talk about it like that. Casting is tough for this one too. But anyway, they're on a train and this German couple is having a fight basically,
Going at
and
it.
she's
Absolutely.
she's sitting like across from them, but the whole train is like bothered by this couple, and then they kind of stop for like a split second, and then she starts yelling at him again, and then Julie's character gets up and moves. She's like, "I'm not gonna sit by these people on this train. I'm trying to read my book, trying to have a good time,"
Right. Just trying to get
and
where I'm
she
going.
yeah, and she goes and sits back across from Jesse, Ethan Hawke's character.
It was very city bus energy. You know what I mean?
It's it's like a play on a meet cute.
Yeah.
It's kind of a meet cute, but it's also got this really annoying couple that makes it like it just kind of skewers the trope a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then she's sitting across from him, and he's like, "Yo, I can't let this, I can't let this pass, bro." You know.
Yeah, for sure.
So he musters up the courage, starts a conversation. He's like, "What's up with that couple? Did you understand them?" She's like, "No, no." And eventually they go to the back car. He's like, "Hey, you want to come get a snack with me?" They go to the back car where they can talk. It's a little more, on the train, the passenger car is like people are kind of being quiet. But then if you go to the dining cart, people are talking. So they go back there to chat, and that's really where it kicks off. They hit it off, and that's always a thing because they could have went back there and
Hmm.
just had that moment. That could have been it, right?
Totally.
But they're hitting it off. They're talking about nonsense. You know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
but just enough for it to be intriguing. He's on his way to Vienna because he has a flight in the morning. Where is she going? She's going.
She is going back home to Paris. She
Okay,
was visiting her grandmother in, I think, Budapest or something like that. I can't remember.
yeah, Budapest. But he's like, look, look, hey, look,
A lot of nervous energy for sure.
you can catch another train. I leave in the morning. We're in Vienna. Let's look, and it very plays on like you were saying that once in a lifetime thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, if I turn out to be a creep, you just hop the next train. It's not
Right.
there's low stakes, and he's, it's always dangerous for a woman. So he's really trying to present himself as like it's safe, and we're just having a moment. I like you, and
Yeah, there was a lot of like, as they were like, just as the movie goes on, I'm just like, man, like obviously this is a film and obviously it's not guaranteed to happen in every situation, but there are a lot of dangerous situations that she's walking into with this like guy that she doesn't really know. You know what I mean?
it's hard for women out here, man. This could have easily been Taken Part One.
For sure. And you know, it's
And
some
we cut to her dad, Liam Neeson. He's like, "What?" As soon as
right.
they get off the train, you just cut to him being like,
Right. Liam
he's just
Neeson with a
having a
French
day.
accent.
He's just having a day, and then he tries to call her, no answer. It's like 3 days go by, and he's next thing you know, he's in Vienna, locked and loaded.
It's definitely. I mean, it's you know, despite the title of the podcast, you know, I did wonder as we were watching it, like, is this one where we should have someone who is a woman to comment on that? Because like I thought about just again how many times they're like walking down like very sketchy dark alleys,
Yeah,
and that's just obviously something that you and I won't know in that way. But it is really interesting how you know the film acknowledges that kind of like, hey, you know, look, I could be a creep but I'm not, I'm a good guy sort of deal. And but also again like the performances are what kills it because like they're both so genuine. And like the actors are so genuine in those performances that it feels like real people being genuine, you know what I mean?
yeah. I mean, we definitely should have women on. I
Yeah,
mean,
we're
just
gonna have
kind of
to,
in general, but also to talk about that perspective, and definitely in a movie like this, and Pretty Woman.
for sure, we're from the Midwest, guys is like omnisexual, right?
Wait, what?
I said we're from the Midwest. The word guys is like omnisexual out
Oh,
here.
totally, totally. Yeah, blacks on white movies.
yeah,
But the rhythm of it needs to be black guys
yeah,
and black
yeah.
or black gals. It could be a companion piece, but
What, Black pals.
black pals. Yeah,
Boom! Just broke it right now.
the
Um,
blacks on black. Wow. Yes, there's definitely the element of danger there, and uh, that the movie kind of addresses, but also moves past.
mhm.
And then they're just in Vienna. They're walking around. These German guys they meet randomly. They're like, "What should we do today?" And they're like, "You Americans, you speak German," but they're like joking, they're laughing. And then they're like, "We're doing a play, and I'm playing a cow, and it's about this." I'm like, "That play sounds not good, but interesting."
It was funny because it seemed very like what they were talking about seemed like kind of improv but just like no
Yeah,
comedy.
yeah.
like
Every time I watch this movie, I'm like, "Are they gonna get to the play?
and it's like
Get to the play!"
even like the guy who makes the joke about, you know, how about you speak German for once, and then he's like, oh no, I'm just joking. He's deadpan as fuck the entire time. Like there's no way you know that that guy's joking even when he says I'm just joking. You know what I mean?
For sure, you could never tell.
So
Um, yeah, and then they're just Vienna. They're talking. They're going where people are. They're at a cafe. They're at this like carnival. They're talking about life, outlook on life. He's talking about love. At some point, they're like, "Okay, let's talk about okay, why are you here?" And he
right.
talks about his story. They talk about past relationships. And I often ask my partner this. Sometimes we see other couples or you see these shows, like reality shows and stuff.
Mhm.
And you're like, what do people talk about in relationships? Because people don't know anything about each other sometimes.
Mm,
And
mhm.
not like, oh, I know you dated this person and that, but like deeper, a little bit deeper, how they feel about things and philosophies and stuff.
Yeah, outlooks.
But they cover that in this night. They cover a lot in one night. I think that's more than a lot of couples. I mean, kind of traditional ways covered in like a couple years.
Definitely. I feel like you know, there's an element of fantasy to this movie. And I feel like, that is part of the fantasy, right? Like that they're having all the right conversations that you should have on a night like this, right? Like they're getting it all out the way. They're understanding and getting to know each other very deeply, at least in the short term. You know what I mean? Like they're building that foundation at a really rapid rate, to your point.
And I think the fantasy is like that this could happen to anybody
Mm-hmm.
if you see as an opportunity and you're genuine and open. This is a it's not really a rom-com, it's not a comedy.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the movie is funny, it's light, in a way, and
Mm-hmm.
it can be funny if we find it funny, but it's not out to be funny. But I do.
Sorry about that. Somebody was cutting the grass outside. I had to go shut that window.
All good. But we do feel like in a rom com or even like maybe even a Disney movie, you feel like the wish fulfillment kind of thing. This could happen to me. I could meet somebody,
Yeah.
have that conversation. They truly see me. I see them. There's a physical attraction there, and it's culminated at the end of the night. Not like they talk about if they are not going to have sex, and they do have sex right at the end of the movie before we cut
I
to the morning. It's
I
implied.
think, yeah, I think it's implied. I think you don't really know. I was wondering about that. It could just be a really hot makeout sesh, in the in the
Yeah,
public park. You never know.
yeah, because they're not like in a room with each other. But also, I think there's an ideal there too, where it's like, oh, we connected, and it wasn't about sex.
Mhm.
You assume that when they meet 6 months later or whatever, that they can consummate then. But every time you meet somebody that you like, there's not an opportunity to jump in the sack, even. You know,
Right.
like these people are out walking all night. They don't even have a hotel or anything, so there's not really the opportunity for it.
Yeah. I think if I can jump in right there, it's obviously a romantic movie. We talked about that at the beginning, but I think it's like romantic in both senses, right? Like the high school literature English version of romantic, right? Like
Right.
this idea of like that life is short and we have to seize the moment. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they're literally in a cemetery at one point, kind of talking about life and death and all of these things. And I do think at that age is when you start to really think about some of those things, some of these bigger life things. So there is that kind of other sense of romantic, um, in the sense that there's almost something that's artistically tragic about knowing there is only the one night, right?
Yeah. And him as an American too,
Mm-hmm.
and really as a male, it's like, yeah, you have to seize the opportunity
Yeah,
at least
there's.
to have the conversation and to see if there's something there. I mean, when you're traveling,
Mm-hmm.
you're a single guy and you're traveling, you know, you may not be out there on the prowl, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak, and some guys are, some guys aren't, but you're definitely open to opportunity. There's like a genetic driving code that says be open to the opportunity of meeting like somebody
Sure.
foreign in a foreign land, foreign to you in a foreign land.
Definitely, and it's interesting too because like even if we're talking about that in a way that is even deeper than sexually, but obviously sexually as well, like the character of Jesse is not thinking about sex this entire time. Like you can see it in the way that he
They're
looks at
both,
her, the
you know.
way that he yeah, they both are, yeah, for sure. The way that they look at each other, the way they kind of like tiptoe around certain words or certain concepts and things like,
And they, start making out pretty, after a couple stops, and so they
for
start
sure.
making out. So it's like, they definitely know, but they're not pressing it. And that's just an interesting part of the movie. Something, something to see in a transmission in terms of like the movie's cultural message to
No, I think there's something about
put
that.
back out there.
I'm sorry about that. I think you're right. There's something about the cultural message here that's happening. That's like, I don't know. Maybe it goes against. I think in some ways Jesse is super American, right? Like he's. We even talked about some of the comments and some of the like political outlooks or life views that he talks about. First and foremost, they're very white American, and they are also very Gen X, right? Like everyone
Yeah,
wants to talk about Gen Z and millennials and things like that, but this is certainly a Gen X movie, right?
yeah,
Um, and there's something about like the cynicism that he always has that like seems distinctly American. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
oh, I bet they all, there's a one part where there's the poet who like offers them a poem, and
yeah,
he's like, I bet he just has the same poem written, but he just uses the word that people choose or whatever. Like he kind of is
yeah.
like looking at everything like that, but not really because he wants to be loved. Like he's like, and he wants to love. So
He
it's
can't
like,
help voicing that that cynical opinion. He can't help but voice it.
he
Well,
cannot, he cannot help.
well, this is actually an interesting thing. I'm going to talk about this Twitter thing I saw, but
Mm-hmm.
it relates very much to real life. This guy, it was his birthday, and he likes chocolate cake, and his girl made a chocolate cake with vanilla like icing in the middle and on
Mm-hmm.
top. And then he said on his thread, he was like, she could tell I was disappointed. So when she asked, I was like, well, I just wanted a chocolate cake, and I mentioned that and she made this vanilla cake. And obviously the internet is split on it. Some people are like, well, he said what he wanted. It's his birthday. And some people are like, well, why are you complaining? Like, she made a cake. You said the cake was good, even though it wasn't exactly what you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess she had a kid in there too as part of it. I don't know didn't memorize the whole thing, but it is something about like this idea that guys have about, I'm just being honest,
Mm-hmm.
but that is not how people get along.
Yeah. There's a really famous quote that I like a lot. Everything said must be true, but not everything true should be said.
Yeah. And it's like, like for this specific cake situation, it's kind of just like there still could be an appreciation for what was done for you on your birthday and the effort that
Mm-hmm.
was put into it.
Mm-hmm.
And being brutally honest is not the, the honorific that guys especially make it out to be, you know?
Not at
Um,
all.
it's not about being fake. It's about, finding gratitude in a situation
I,
or again, like living in the moment like this movie is. Cause he is about to go off about the poet thing. And if he was with like his buddies out there, he'd be like, they would have a whole conversation about how fake that was and this poem and they
mm-hmm.
would trash it. But he's in this moment with her. So he kind of stops himself and he's like, oh no, it's yeah, no, it's still, he kind of like realizes like that was still a great moment that they shared, whether the poem was brand new made off the top or whether it was recycled. They had their moment together because of that, and it enlightened something for them. And he kind of pulls back, which is kind of a lesson to take. Like sometimes you don't have to like slam your partner and be like, I'm just being honest. And also whenever somebody says just,
Yeah.
they're lying. I'm just being honest. I was
Mm-hmm.
just saying this. You weren't just saying that. You knew it would rile people up. Okay, be
Right.
just.
No, there's a lot of cowardice in the things and some of the things that American masculinity touts as bravery. We can admit that as just like a baseline. But yeah, I think there's something to take it back to the movie. There's something very real about just the film itself. And I think that's some of it, right? Like there are plenty of times where either Ethan Hawke's character or Julie Delpy's character will like realize that they're ruining the moment.
Yeah,
by just talking, right? Like that instinct that we all have to keep filling air. I certainly suffer from it, but like they catch themselves and again recommit back to that moment.
You know what happens? I think what you just said really made me think is like so many times, like if you're doing mantras or manifesting, that kind of thing, you're supposed to say things out loud, right?
Mm-hmm.
Saying things out loud makes them real. And a lot of times we're in our thoughts about how we think about something, but conversations happen in real time.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't get a chance to add perspective to your thoughts when you're just saying them out loud for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times you get on a rant or you're rambling or you get worked up and you're talking and you're saying things for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And so you
Mm-hmm.
don't have any perspective. So like in this situation with the cake or with Jesse here in the movie about the poem specifically, just because that moment is kind of a microcosm for a lot of things in the movie, is like he's just saying off the top of the head. But being in that moment with her just gave him a pause where
Mm-hmm.
like if he had had these thoughts and was in like a forum to talk about them and people were offering different perspectives, then he got more time to think about it, he might come back with a different,
Mm-hmm.
he might voice it differently. But when it's just off the top, a lot of times you just kind of end up putting your foot in your mouth
Yeah.
repeatedly.
And there's also like, I think there's something about it too that he shows a few times in the movie, which is like also like there's that instinct to want to impress the person that you're attracted to and with, right? So like, kind of like show, and so often I think in American culture, like the cynicism, right? Cool, right? Literally that word cool, being neither hot nor cold, right? Like
Right.
nonchalance. And there's so much of American culture that feels like being cool is being like cynical or uncaring. And so I think there's a lot of times where, like you said, he starts to just kind of speak off the top with that instinct to like, let me show you what I know or what I think real quick. But yeah, I do believe that it's really interesting to see him catch himself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Which
And
one did you also?
I was just going to say, there's I think we've talked about it before, but there's a lot of times where people use that terminology, just being honest, and it's like, are you being honest or are you being cruel?
Yeah.
Because you can be honest without being cruel, right? Word choice
Totally. Totally.
matters, and I think for you probably as certainly for as a person who writes, I think I've been approached before like, why is it you're so good at writing but you can't communicate yourself? And it's like, well, in writing I get multiple drafts at you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah. You get to attack it in different ways. Yeah.
Right, I come back to it 6 months later and I make it better, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't work that way in real-time conversation.
100%. And I think I was gonna say I think that's good. We've been here for a minute. I was just looking at the time.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah,
I
it's
guess I would just go, as far as I think there's something that you talked about how he can't help himself. I do think if we're
yeah.
talking about cultural messages that the movie does send, right? I think there is that certain kind of Gen X, white American male thing that you still run into, right? With people from
Ooh,
that age group. You know what I
should there
mean?
be
Where
a
it's just, hmm?
before sunrise for like every generation then at some point,
Yeah, there should be.
right?
That's a great point, and there should be 100%. There should be some sort of before sunrise for every generation.
Maybe medicine for melancholy is the millennial before sunrise.
I have to watch it even more so now,
And I need to see it again. But they
for
should
sure.
definitely do. They should definitely catch up with those characters. Just to repeat it. Like, why not? Come on, Barry, what you doing, man?
Yeah, come
The
on, man.
Lion King on pause.
But
Well,
like,
he already did that, but he's doing something else like that. I can't remember now, but
but yeah, just like the idea that like, it's something you run into where someone says something to you and it's like you just had to say that right now, right? Like you had to tell me your political opinion. You had to share your opinion on this social matter. Like we're in line at the grocery store, my man. What are we doing? And there's something about that inability to stop themselves from sharing their opinion that struck me this time watching it.
We could definitely use more grace and nuance in our conversation abilities. You know, we could practice conversation a little bit better as people totally, you know,
And I think,
just everybody. Nobody's smooth anymore. Nobody's like graceful and like segueing, you know, in conversations or and we're also so combative. Like there's ways to talk about things and have different opinions without wanting to kill somebody, basically.
yeah, that's what I was gonna. That's what you were just saying now made me think about. You know, like, there's so much about American conversation as, I don't know, like a concept that is really debate based, right? Like, I'm gonna take this point, you take the opposite point, and then we do some version of screaming at one another until the other one, believes what we believe. But that never actually happens, right? You don't
Right.
convince people of your thought process. So there is something that's incredibly combative, and that's, I think, another part of like the fantasy or maybe even escapism of these films, right? To watch people, even when they argue, especially in later films, um it's not so combative or trying to win, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. If we can figure that out, we'll definitely be ahead of the game.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that a lot recently too, but I'm working on it. Hey, we're all works in progress. Also remember that.
Everyone's on their own journey.
Yeah, let's hit this casting. Let's hit
For
this
sure.
casting and wrap this up,
I
man.
feel that's got to be pretty quick process.
I casted everybody.
Oh
I
shit.
casted the fighting couple on the train,
Yeah,
the
exactly.
German actors. I
The
casted,
cow that we didn't see.
yeah, I casted the whole play we didn't see. The conductor.
Sweet.
Uh, okay, I think I have an interesting casting
All right, let's go.
for Jesse. I'll go first. I'll
Yeah,
go
go
with
for it.
Jaden Smith.
That is interesting.
Yeah, Jaden Smith, man. I think, man, he's the sensitive soul we need right now.
For
Yeah,
sure.
I like Jaden, and in the few movies he's been in, man, I've always been impressed.
Agreed.
And in the show, the Get Down, the Netflix show they did, he was solid in that too.
Yeah, he was great in that. I Yeah, there's something about, we didn't do like the whole what whites are this for question, but I
Oh,
think
right,
this movie is definitely for artists. It's for like anybody who's like a film buff sort of deal. Like, I think if you're an artist, you'll will connect to some of the conversations that are happening in this, no matter what your art form. And I just say that to say that I think Jaden is a great example of that, because I think he is what a young black artist is right now. You know what I mean? Or at least one version of it. And I think, that would be really interesting to see on screen.
and on that note, I also think it's for like any young. I mean, this is made for white people, but like the young white English major
Yeah.
or person that even has a romanticized view of Europe
Yeah.
especially traveling abroad, theater students, you know,
Yeah.
you know, it has that kind of energy, even though it's not like a musical or anything. Definitely like your liberal arts educated person, but not limited to them. Because I think the conversations are so universal
Mhm.
that it's meant to be like this is who it's for, those kind of people that you and I mentioned. But it could easily grab anybody with an open mind.
For sure. I think this movie
Anybody
actually,
that's been in a relationship too. Like it's really like you've been in a kind of rocky relationship or
right.
even found the love of your life, you could find like
Yeah.
that
If you've
fantasy
had
in it.
any relationship in which you've tried to communicate more than not,
Yeah.
like, I think there's something to be found in this movie. And I think this movie, despite being kind of a small indie classic, I think it could actually probably had even a bigger audience if people just were like, randomly introduced to it over time.
Yeah. Just the awareness of it. All right. So who you got for
So
Jesse?
Uh, I originally wanted to go Caleb McLaughlin. I felt like
Oh,
the
Stranger Things.
Stranger Things. I thought he was the right age, and I would be interested in that. But then I really had a hard time finding a female lead to match that up with. So I ended up choosing this person really so that I could have the lead that I chose. But I went with Shamik Moore. But my thing is this is a movie that would have had to come out in 2018. So that's how I entered it to get them at the right age.
I respect that. For Celine, I went with Karija Toure, French actress best known for the film Girlhood. She the French black. Her parents are from the Ivory Coast. She grew up in Paris. She's young actress, up and coming, mostly French films, but like she did this movie Girlhood, which was like kind of an
Mhm.
indie dark 2014. And I
Same
want to,
year as Boyhood, so not to be confused
yeah, Girlhood, Boyhood, and not even the same kind of movie. But anyway,
at all.
yeah, we'll bring her back. I don't know if she's even done anything really American.
I don't think
What's
so.
your
I was
list?
so I chose Karija Ture.
You chose her too. She must be
Yeah.
like named Black French.
Th- I tried to spend a little bit of time looking for like a black French actress to fill this out. Like I said, especially one that was younger in that 23 age group. And I just don't think maybe there are not enough of them. And there's also just not enough connection between American media and French film for us to
Yeah,
really know what's happening over there, even with the internet. But I will say this, she was kind of somebody I thought about to begin with. She's 28 now. She's the same age as Shamik Moore. So again, that was why I said it in 2018 to have them both be 23. But I mean, I would highly suggest everybody see Girlhood. Like that is a movie that is very French, but that peak at being a black teenager, being a black teenage girl, and all of the things that come with maybe growing up in, you know, a poorer neighborhood or any of the things that come along with that or poverty or anything. I think that is a movie that would cross over to a lot of people. You know what I
for
mean?
sure, for sure.
Like there's something that is, you know, not to use that word universal, but there's something very universal about girlhood, and she's great in it. So definitely Carisha Toure.
That's definitely a theme of this app with this movie and this Girlhood and even Jaden Smith's work. Like Karate Kid is well known, but he's done other stuff. So
Mm.
when you think about these big budget movies, for example, and it's like they always say like the marketing budget is like double the production budget or whatever.
Mm.
And that's really the thing to keep in mind is advertising,
Mm-hmm.
is like marketing, is accessibility. Are people even aware of your thing? The strongest tool today, and we've seen this recently, is like name recognition. You can get far just with like if people can remember your name or remember the thing you put out and can find information about it. Speaking of when we went to the film festival and saw top five, we also
Mm.
saw this movie Magical Girl by this director Carlos Vermouth, who's a Spanish director, Spanish film.
Yeah.
And he's made a couple films since, but it is so hard to find information on the guy.
Oh my
So
God.
like nobody, if I ever bring him up in conversation, even with
No
cinephiles,
one
they're like,
knows.
nobody knows what I'm talking about.
No one
But
knows.
I know people would really be freaked out by his movies. They're so trippy and so
His
well done.
movies that his movies are so well done.
Uh,
Yeah.
and even coming off of like the show I just worked on, the show Grand Crew, the NBC show, and it's like the people that know about it really like it, love it,
mhm.
But there's a lot of time I have to tell people about it.
Right.
So, with all these projects, sometimes it's like, well, who is Before Sunrise for? Well, who is even gonna find it? You know,
Mm.
maybe we did our part, put it on this podcast. It'll come up for a couple people that maybe haven't seen it. Maybe one extra person sees it. We're not
Yeah.
like global podcast. We're not raking in cash from this thing or anything, but
Right.
one person at a time, we get these like lesser known projects and actors out there. It all adds up in some kind of aggregate.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'd love to see, hearing you talk about that, I'd love to see some young people watch this and hear what they had to say about this movie that is, like we said, very specific to its time, but also pretty universal. I guess what I'll say and kind of end it out for myself is building off of what you just said about getting the word out there and everything. I'm just going to highly recommend again, everybody, to see the movie Magical Girl from 2013 by the,
How would they how would they see it?
I don't know,
They got to
look it
call
up.
me because I bought a copy.
Carlos Vermouth, please.
I bought a copy one time. I found it online. Like I'm sure you can't find it now. They have to call me, rent,
Right, to
borrow
get
my
it.
copy to see the movie. So I got to
Exactly.
hold a screening on a
Reach
DVD.
out, DM. We are the only two people that have seen it, but we will direct you that way.
And speaking of like, younger people, there should be another podcast like Young Pals on Black Guys on White Movies where they do a movie, the movie we did after our pod. They just follow us up like, well, this is what they said, and then we watched it, and then
And this is how they were wrong.
so that's the spinoff. It's Black Guys on White Movies. Then it's
Exactly.
Black
Once we
Gals
build
on
out that
White
podcast
Movies.
network,
Then it's
we got it.
Young Pals on Black Guys on White Movies. Three podcast universe.
Killing
Uh
it. Killing it. Perhaps the second least money making franchise after the Before trilogy.
in the record books. All right,
Right.
y'all. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time. Next up.
Awesome. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed.